All right, let's dive right into a really fascinating legal case, one that totally challenges our everyday ideas about what makes a marriage, well, real. We're about to unpack a wild story about a deal, a visa, and an unexpected trip to the Supreme Court. So here's the big question at the heart of it all. If two people get married, not for love, but strictly as a business deal to get a visa, is that marriage legit in the eyes of the law? This explainer is all about a real court case that answers that exact question. And believe me, the answer is probably not what you think. And where does this story start? It starts with a number, $2,000. This was the price agreed upon between Liberty Albios, a Filipino citizen, and Daniel Fringer, an American citizen. It was a payment for a very specific kind of service. And here was the deal, plain and simple. Fringer would marry Albios. In exchange for that $2,000, the marriage would pave the way for her to get a U.S. visa. So they got married in October 2004. But just as they planned, they separated immediately. They never lived together, never acted like a married couple, because that was never the point. It was all business. But these things rarely go as planned. Fast forward 2 years, and it's actually Albios herself who goes to court. And what does she want? She wants a judge to declare the marriage totally void, as if it never even happened. So what was her argument? Well, it was pretty straightforward. She basically said, hey, this was all just an act, a sham. She claimed they never had any intention of living like a husband and wife, or starting a family. The whole thing, she argued, was just for show, to get a visa. So how could it possibly be a real marriage? To back this up legally, she pointed to this idea of a marriage in jest. You can think of it like a prank marriage, right? Where two friends get married as a total joke and everyone knows it doesn't mean anything. She was trying to say their marriage was just like that there was no real consent to be married. And you know what? At first, it totally worked. Both the local trial court and the Court of Appeals sided with her. They looked at the evidence and said, yeah, this whole thing is a farce. They ruled that since the goal was never to actually build a family life, the marriage was invalid from the moment it began. But hold on, the story doesn't end there. The government wasn't having it. They appealed the decision, and the case went all the way up to the Philippine Supreme Court. And this, my friends, is where the whole thing takes a very sharp and unexpected turn. You see, the Supreme Court didn't really care about the $2,000 deal or the fact they never lived together. Instead, their entire decision came down to a really subtle but absolutely critical legal distinction. A line they drew between two very different concepts. The court drew a bright, clear line between these two ideas. On one side, you have consent. That's the what. Did you willingly and consciously agree to enter into the legal state of marriage? Simple as that. On the other side, you have motive. That's the why. Why did you do it? For love, for money, for status, or, in this case, for a visa. The court made it crystal clear. Legally speaking, these two things are worlds apart. So let's break down how this one little distinction between consent and motive completely flipped the case on its head and led to a stunning reversal. This was the only question the Supreme Court cared about. Forget why they got married for a second. The real question was, did they freely and consciously agree to be legally bound to each other as husband and wife? And the court's answer to that was a definite, resounding yes. Here's the logic, and it's pretty powerful. Unlike a marriage in jest, their entire scheme, their whole plan, required a real, legally recognized marriage to work. For Albios to even apply for that visa, her marriage certificate had to be legitimate. They absolutely intended to create that legal bond, even if it was just to use it for their own purposes. Their consent wasn't just there, it was the whole point of the plan. And then the court went even further. They basically said that the government has no business judging why people get married. Your reasons are your own. It's part of your right to privacy. Whether you marry for convenience, for money, for companionship, it doesn't matter. As long as you follow the legal steps and you both consent, the marriage is valid. And then they drop this bombshell. Love is not a legal requirement for marriage. All right, so this ruling builds to a really powerful conclusion. Not just about this one couple, but about how the law sees the entire institution of marriage. Now, don't get me wrong, the court was not impressed with what Albios did. They literally said she made a mockery of the sacred institution of marriage. They were clear that her motives were dishonest, but, and this is the big but, her bad motive wasn't a legal reason to just erase the marriage.
The court then pointed directly to the Constitution, which calls marriage an inviolable social institution. That's a fancy way of saying it's something the law has to protect, even from the whims and caprices of the people in it. You can't just treat it like a temporary tool you can pick up and then toss aside when you're done.
And this final line from the court just says it all. They essentially told her, look, you use the law to get married for your own benefit. You can't now come back and ask that same law to get you out of it just because it's inconvenient. The marriage, they declared, was real, and it was still in effect. So that leaves us with this final, really thought-provoking question, doesn't it? This whole case perfectly highlights the clash between our romantic ideas of marriage and its cold, hard legal reality. It really makes you ask, what is a marriage at its core? Is it about love and family, or is it, at the end of the day, just a legal contract? It's a fascinating thing to think about.